All right, good morning. I'm Pat Godwin Jr., president of the Godwin Group in Dunn, North Carolina. We do the snowplow dump trucks for you guys and been doing it for quite a while. I know we've got other municipalities represented here as well. Most everyone is getting about the same equipment over the years, and I'll give you kind of a timeline as to how all this happens. This is the earlier stuff, and you can tell by the color of the lenses and stuff, I've been dragging this stuff around for about 13 years. But I kind of beat up and everything, but it kind of transitions from the earlier models here on your left to the latest and greatest, which is the touch screen over on the right hand side. And I realize that this is probably phasing out. Greg just told me that you probably only got one of those in your fleet. Of the other municipalities represented here, does anyone else know whether or not you've got any of those? Oh, you do, okay. Several, okay. Well, we might need to slow down just a few minutes then instead of just breezing through that. So from an operations standpoint on these controllers, at the end of the day, we're always getting the same job done. We're plowing, we're spreading, we're raising and lowering the dump bed, whatever hydraulics we need on the truck, we're getting the same thing done with all of these. This is just a transition over a period of time, is what this is. And this particular model here of console came out in 1992. And I can't give you an exact year as to when we stopped using them because it just slowly kind of faded away. I'm gonna guess we've got some trucks out there that might be about 6 or 8 years old that might still have this in it. But not many trucks at all that would be any newer than that would. But this particular console here used to be mounted up on the dash when we didn't have room. Maybe there was a bench seat or something like that, and we didn't have anywhere to mount it between the seats or such. This thing would be mounted up on the dash of the truck. The reason we tend not to use this one anymore because everything's turned to plastic in these trucks now. There's not enough of substance to be able to mount something like this, and times have changed. Things have changed over time and progressed. But the way this console works is everything on here except for one function is ignition source. So that means that when you turn the key off on the truck, it kills this whole console except for one switch. And we'll go over that right now in just a minute. But when you get ready to operate these hydraulics on this console, you get the truck cranked, you engage the PTO, or if it's a crankshaft drive, as soon as you crank the engine, you've got power through your hydraulic pump. And in order to operate any hydraulics, you got to turn your master switch on. When you turn your master switch on, this little red LED should light up. If it does not light up, either the bulb is burned out of it or the hydraulic system is shut down for some reason. It might be a hot oil situation or a low oil situation. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a few minutes. But if this is not in good repair, I would suggest replacing the switch and let's make sure that this thing is functioning properly, because here's one of the issues that I have with an operator, and don't think operators just in this segment here that I'm picking on you, because I'm not. I'm gonna be picking on the technicians a little bit later on too, some of the things that I run into periodically, some things people need to be aware of. The master switch here is your safety switch. If you've got a passenger riding around in the truck with you to prevent accidental operation or intentional or whatever the case may be, this master switch should be turned off when you're not using your hydraulics. That's one of the things I find with operators. They'll turn this thing on and just leave it on all the time. And that's not what it's there for. I mean, if we were going to do that, we wouldn't even have the switch in there. But it's made as your lifeline, your safety line, so to speak, to turn the hydraulics off, to disable this console when you're not using your hydraulics, and we need to be using this one more. So if I would gig an operator on anything, that would be one of the things that I would gig them on. So technicians, never fear, you got some coming at you a little bit later on. But no big deals, but it's just one of those things that this is what I see, trends that I see. So turning the master switch on enables the hydraulics, so now we're able to operate them. And on the older systems, the next switch over on the older systems, we used to have a headlight and a plow light switch. All of you know nowadays that's dash mounted now, because we've gone to multiplex wiring, and this switch has gone from this console into the dash of the truck, because that's part of the wiring system of the truck now when we get it from the factory. So this is a headlight and a plow light switch. The only thing it does is it makes a selection of which you want to operate at that particular time, whether it's plow lights turning it up or headlights flipping it down. Now, you still turn your headlights on and off like you normally did, and you dim your headlights like you normally did on that truck. The only thing this switch does, it just selects which set of headlights you're going to burn, whether it's the original headlights or the plow lights on the truck. That's all it does, it's just a selector switch. All right, the next one we've got over here is a spreader light. This has a little green lens in it, and that usually goes on the back of the spreader, so at nighttime you can see the salt being dispensed from the rear of the truck. Keep in mind this is ignition source now. I know in years past, maybe this was battery source and somebody would accidentally leave it on Friday night or Friday when they came in at the end of the shift, and by Monday morning the battery would be dead on the truck. So this is an ignition source switch now to help prevent something like that from happening. All right, the next one we got, this is the only switch that is battery sourced. Everything else on here is ignition source. The emergency lights. The emergency lights are battery sourced because there's sometimes where you need to be outside the truck, maybe beside the highway, and with the engine off and be doing something. So that's why we do a battery source on this switch, is so you'll be able to do that, because if you turn the key off and get out of the truck and this was the ignition source, it wouldn't work. So this is the only battery source function on this panel here. Everything else works with the key switch or is enabled or disabled through the key switch. So just keep that in mind. The next one, this one says tailgate lock and unlock. It could have various other switches that are here. I'm not sure that anyone in here has a tailgate lock and unlock that's solenoid operated on one of these. You may have, but there can be different options for this function here. So just read the label for what it represents, and it'll be self-explanatory as to what that particular function is. This next one over here is kind of the same way. It can be different things for different customers because your requirements may be different. Lynchburg requirements may be different than Harrisburg or whatever, and these two switches are flexible here on the end of it. So this particular one says a tarp control, tarp cover and uncover if you have a hydraulic tarp, but it could have some other function in here. So look at the label and to denote what function that is. The next one over here is going to be plow right and left, pushing the button to the left, and this is a momentary button. This is a spring-loaded button, so you push it to make the plow go left. When you release it, it goes back to the off position. So pushing the left side of the switch, plow should go left, right side plow should go right, and like I said, it is a momentary function to enable you to angle that plow. The next one over here is going to be plow up and down. It works the same way, but it's turned vertical. Pressing on the top of it, plow should go up. Pressing on the bottom, plow should go down. And one switch that is here also that is not a part of this panel is what we call a dump bed switch, and it's on a completely separate panel. This was a VDOT request years and years ago. They wanted to separate the dump bed switch from the rest of this console, because if the operator raised that dump bed, they wanted to know that he meant what he didn't accidentally hit a switch. So I didn't bring one of those with me today, but that switch looks just like this plow light switch here, but it's mounted on its own little panel, typically over to the left-hand side of the steering wheel. Whether it's a GM truck, an International, or whatever brand it is typically to the left-hand side of the steering wheel. Now, that particular switch ties in with the master switch as well. So you do have to have the master switch on to make that dump bed work, even though it is a separate panel that's mounted to the dash. Over here we have two lights. We have a body elevated light, which is red, and it doesn't tell you how high the bed is or what dump angle you're raised at. It only tells you the bed's not all the way down. That's all it does. It's just what we call an idiot light. Back in the old cars and stuff, when you used to have lights that light up in the dash to, check engine and stuff like that, that's what we call an idiot light. So that's what this light does. It just lets you know the bed's not all the way down, to bring that to your attention. The next one we got here is a clogged filter light, and this is amber or orange in color. And the way this one works is if there is too much pressure in the hydraulic system going through the filter, when the oil is returning through it, this light will come on. Now, that being said, it can activate for two reasons. Number one, it activates because the filter might be stopped up on the hydraulic system. And that's what its main purpose is. Number two, and something a lot of people didn't know, is early in the morning when it's cold outside and you got cold hydraulic oil, that oil gets thick, kind of like syrup. And it's hard to push it through that filter. So when it's hard to push it through the filter, the pressure rises in it and this light accidentally comes on. Nothing wrong with it, it's perfectly normal. When you turn the hydraulic pump on and you let it run for about 30 minutes and that oil starts to warm up in the system, it thins out, pressure drops, light goes out. So what I usually tell an operator with this particular light here is that don't worry too much about this light unless it's operating for more than 30 minutes at a time. If it's running for a half a day or several hours or whatever, before this thing goes out, then there's no reason to stop the truck and red flag the truck. At the end of your shift, just write it up so somebody can check it out, make sure the filter's in good shape, make sure the sensor is in good shape. So that is one thing that's perfectly normal on one of these hydraulic systems, is early in the morning with cold hydraulic oil for this light to light up for about 30 minutes or so. There's no reason, that's why it's amber, there's no reason to stop and do anything necessarily other than just write it up at any shift that you got this issue. All right, then over here on the last 1/3 of the panel here, one of the ones that we've got on this side is hot oil, low oil. So we actually shut the hydraulic system down, and this is in conjunction with the master switch. That's why we mounted these two close together, is because they kind of work off of each other. And the hot/low oil light here actually did something. It shut the hydraulics down on the truck. And either we lost hydraulic oil in the tank and there's a float switch inside that triggered, or there's something deadhead. There may be a hydraulic motor going out that's building heat in the system, might be a pump going out. There's several different things it could be that would build heat in the hydraulic system, and this particular switch or light would light up. Now what happens here is either in a low oil or in a hot oil condition, what happens is when this light comes on, this light immediately goes out. Even though the switch is turned on, the light goes out. Think about it this way. Inside this room, there is a door, there is a switch over close to the door there to be able to turn these lights on. But there's a main breaker somewhere in this building too that you can turn the lights off. So that's basically what we've done, is we turned the hydraulics off at the main breaker so you don't have any control over it at this point, because we have a condition that warrants that. So what happens is when we have a hot or a low oil situation, it triggers this to come on and also triggers that to go out. So that's how we know we're in a low oil or a hot oil situation, is because even though we have this switch turned on, the light just went out and this one next to it came on. Now, somebody says, well, how do I get that problem corrected? Well, what you need to do is you need to get with a technician and find out what's going on with the truck. It is either a low or a hot oil situation. Could be a bad sensor, several things it could be. But you want to get with a technician, let him troubleshoot it, find out what's going on there. And once the condition comes back to normal, meaning that the oil level, you put more oil in the tank and the oil level rises, or it cools down enough, probably to about 170 degrees or so, then it automatically reset. So, it doesn't have a manual reset. There's no reset button anywhere. This will automatically reset itself when the condition gets back to normal. And we shut hydraulic systems down, and this is for technicians. We shut the hydraulics down at 180 degrees, and you'll lose about 1/3 of the oil level inside the hydraulic tank before it shuts down. And once you bring those conditions back to normal, everything will reset itself and be okay. So the next functions we've got over here are our spreader controls, and our toggle button here is our manual and automatic mode switch. The center position, this is a 3-position switch. 3-position means that I can click this thing in 3 different positions, unlike a light switch is called a 2-position. A light switch is on or it's off. With this one, the center part is in the off position, and switching it up is in auto mode, and switching it down is in the manual mode and or tools if you're using hydraulic tools. Somebody says, well, okay, well, which one of these do I use? How do I know when to use which one? And If this were a state DOT group sitting in front of me, I would probably use automatic, because under normal circumstances you can drive a little faster down the highway because you're on open road, 4 lanes, stuff like that. And what automatic does is it ties the hydraulics on the spreader into the speedometer of the truck. And as the truck speeds up, the hydraulics speed up. As the truck slows down and stops, so does the hydraulics. It does the same thing. So as a rule of thumb, I would run in automatic for if I were a state DOT and could run a little faster. Now, the reason I say that is because over the years, electronics have changed in the truck. And the speedometer signal is getting more and more faint. It's getting harder to read now because the electronics are getting more precise and drawing less current. So what's happening here is what I usually use as a rule of thumb is 20 miles an hour. If your normal mode of operation will allow you to spread salt at 20 miles an hour or faster, of course you got to go by the rules of whatever the municipality set for you. For Lynchburg, I'm not sure what it is. Does anybody know what it is for Lynchburg? What's the fastest safe speed the city wants you to go? Does anybody know? Okay, usually it's about 35. It depends on the road, obviously conditions and the road surface. And I'm not saying that's what this needs to be, but on average, that's what it usually is for a lot of municipalities, but only if you can do that safely. But I usually put a 20 miles an hour threshold on it because anytime we're 20 miles an hour or faster, the automatic mode kind of kicks in and does its job like it should, because we got a good strong signal coming from the speedometer. But as we start to slow down, that signal gets more and more faint. And when that signal gets faint at about 20 miles an hour or lower, the automatic mode just kind of fades away and drops out sometimes. So if your operations will only allow you to drive up to 20 miles an hour, I will usually select manual. Now when you select manual, that's just exactly what it means, manual. And when we come up to a stop sign or a stoplight, we've got to reach over here and turn this thing off. Because if we don't do that while the truck's sitting there waiting for the light to turn green, we're still putting out material back here behind the truck. It's piling up back there now. So in the manual mode, you just got to remember that part of it. Now later on in some of this, you'll see how we're advancing this, because there are some answers now. Remember, this dates back to 1992. This is the old booger right here. But that's the difference between manual and automatic and how I would operate my spreader in my truck. You have the spreader dials, the lower one being the spinner. That's how many lanes we're covering. That's the little spinner that turns like a little helicopter blade throwing the salt out on the highway. And then the auger or conveyor, which is the chain that's dragging it out the back. So you put those on the proper dial settings based on what the supervisor advised you to do. And therefore you're spreading an accurate amount of material. And we'll go into a little bit later in the technician side of it, if it's their responsibility, we'll go into how to calibrate one, because there's the newer the system gets, the easier they are to calibrate, I promise you that. But once you have initial calibration on a truck, then your supervisor will tell you whatever to set the dial settings on, or there'll be a chart that will be made up in the door pocket of your truck to tell you what you need to be doing based on how many pounds per mile I need to be putting out. So that's basically how those dial settings work. The other button that we've got over here, the little chrome button, is a blast button. It's a momentary button. So if we're going through an intersection, going across a bridge, going on an on or off ramp or something like that where we need more material, the moment we push this in, immediately that spreader conveyor chain starts pulling more material out the back of the truck, but the spinner still turns at the same speed. So whether we're doing 1 lane, 2 lanes, ever how many lanes we're doing, we're still doing the same number of lanes. What changed is the conveyor chain speeded up to be able to compensate and put out more material in that area that we're spreading at. So that's what the blast button is for. Is a momentary switch that if I'm approaching a bridge here that I need more material, as soon as my front tires hit that bridge, I'd press this button, and as long as I'm going across the bridge, I would blast it, put out more material, you know, because we all know bridges freeze faster than regular road surface does usually. And once I get to the other side of the bridge, as soon as the back tires come off of it, release the button, and it goes back to whatever the presets were on these knobs. So that's how the blast operates. It's strictly a momentary function. And we've got some other features later on one of these as well. Plus we got some things you operators need to be aware of on the new stuff too, because these newer systems can rat on you too if you're not using these controls right. But those are the basic functions of the rocker switch console is what we call this one. This, like I said, this one started in 1992 and carried us up to about probably 6-8 years ago or so, but we were using very few of them at that time. From a technician standpoint, if the fuse were to blow in this, there is a fuse on the back side of it. From an operator standpoint, don't be messing with this because you can cause a circuit board to be burned up in there, and that one will be on you. You'll probably get written up for it, but because this is a special fuse. The technicians will know what I'm talking about. This is a 3-amp fast blow fuse. So just don't go stick any old fuse in it. Even though it may fit, it may not be the right one. This is a very sensitive fuse here. So if the spreader system does go out, I would advise you to just get in touch with the technician and let them take care of that problem. They probably got the correct fuse in their toolbox. You know, that's something that you need to be aware of. And that only controls the spreader system. So that's the only thing you got to worry about there is just making sure you put the correct fuse in it. Anybody have any questions about this particular console so far? Any at all? All right, we'll move to the next one.